Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America online, thisweekinamerica.us. Today and every day until 2030, 10,000 baby boomers will reach the age of 65 and be eligible to retire. According to research, the most challenging aspect of retirement for baby boomers, well, it's not financial, but a sense of purpose. On today's This Week in America, we look at a new way of thinking about retirement and measuring personal success. Back with us is Kathleen Brady, a certified professional coach, educator, author, motivational speaker, frequent media resource. Kathleen brings over 25 years of experience helping students and professionals identify and integrate their personal and professional goals. Her career started in the placement office at Columbia Law School, then Assistant Dean of Career Services at Fordham, later responsible for recruitment and professional development on the employer's side. A former reporter for Time, author of 4 books on career life transitioning, including Get a Job, 10 Steps to Career Success. Kathleen Brady, Director of Coaching, Preferred Transition Resources, back with us on This Week in America. Kathleen, it is always a pleasure. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
It is a great topic. And again, the book that we usually talk about, Get a Job, that's still available, still one of my favorite books. It's so easy to read. Got 10 steps to career success. And you'll get information on that. Just check it out at Amazon or go to our website. We're talking about this whole thing of retiring, reimagining retirement. And I mentioned in the beginning, it's probably somewhat catches people off guard. It's not necessarily financial, the most challenging aspect, but a sense of purpose. And when you think about that, so often we define ourselves by who we are professionally, and suddenly that's not there anymore, is it?
That's exactly right. And I think retirement is such a scary moment for people because it sort of forces us to look at our own mortality. We realize we're playing the back nine.
Yes, exactly.
And it's interesting because what tends to happen to people is rather than sort of embrace the back nine and approach it with some enthusiasm and vigor, we sort of hover around 7 and 8 because we're afraid to go forward, what might happen next. But the reality is in retirements are lasting as long as careers are lasting for people.
Yes.
So, I would say this ain't your daddy's retirement anymore. Baby boomers, God bless us, we do everything differently, and we are going to do retirement differently. And so it's just helping people to reimagine it and think about what does it mean, what does it look like. So that's what we've been doing.
You wrote a really interesting article on Reimagine Retirement. You bring up something that's interesting. We consider 50 the new 30, so this aging thing that you're talking about, we may not realize it, but it is getting time that we should, maybe pause a little bit. And like you said, we're actually counting down rather than up when we've got birthdays coming. We feel in good shape and we think we're going to go forever. Sometimes, don't we?
We absolutely do. And the thing is, hopefully we will.
Yes.
It'd be great if we all go till we're 90s, and that's what we want to plan for. And be able to, I spend my whole life doing transitions, and some transitions are thrust upon us and are unwelcome, and others are thrust upon us unexpectedly, but we embrace them. But I will tell you, retirement is a transition going to happen for every one of us. So we really ought to be thinking about it, and we want to think about it well before we're 60. This is something that you want to, it's funny, I was just having this conversation with my nephew in his 30s. Like, you need to start thinking about this now. Think about what do you want to look like, your life to look like after you finish work? How much money are you going to need? How are you going to plan for that? And it's very difficult for people that young. At that point, that's when you just kind of sock away your money, boys and girls, when you're in your 30s and 40s. Yes. But by the time you get to be 50, 55, again, you're still thinking, I got another 15, 20 years of work, but it's a good time to be thinking about how are you going to ramp down, because
Yes.
You don't necessarily want to go at that same pace or, kind of do the things that you did when you were, it's like playing that, 7th and 8th hole over and over and over again. I can't do that anymore. What else could I do? And the beauty is you can do anything. The bad news is you can do anything.
Well, exactly. You've got to sort of get goals in mind. And we'll talk about that because so often we get to the end of the line and we're thinking, okay, what do I do now? And you're talking about with a little thought ahead of time, you can actually transition into something. Kathleen Brady, our guest on the program, Director of Coaching for Preferred Transition Resources. Her website is preferredtransition.com. You go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on. In the article, it was interesting because you talk about one of the big changes, besides, again, financial, the change in the daily structure. All of a sudden, you don't have that structure there. You're like, okay, it's 8 o'clock. I guess I can get out of bed and I can sort of figure out what I want to do today. That structure is gone. Is that difficult for people to adjust to that? You no longer live the life that you had to be somewhere at a certain time.
It's incredibly difficult for people. And I've talked to people across industries around that, school teachers who had very regimented daily structures, and now they get up and they don't know quite what to do with themselves, and they're just kind of bumping around and being inefficient is how one person said it to me. And then that feels like, well, that's not who I am. I'm a really organized person. So it's disorienting. And so part of it is helping someone like that either enjoy the lack of structure, or to put some structure in place with new things that they've always wanted to do but didn't have time to do. And I think that's the key for a lot of people who've been so busy being a teacher or being a lawyer, or being a doctor, they haven't had time to even think about what are their interests and what are the things that they care about, and how do they rediscover that? And so how do they use this unstructured time in a structured way to help them make some of those kind of do the reflection and have some aha moments for themselves?
Another part of the transition that can be difficult for people is the changing relationships when you're dealing with family, friends, and workers. Suddenly you can't just stop by the office and chat with Bill because you and Bill have been friends for a number of years, because Bill is still working and needs to be somewhat productive and you're not. Talk about how that changes, because it does change your relationships.
Yeah. It's particularly hard, I think, for sort of our C-suite executives and people who've had a lot of authority that are used to sort of coming in and saying something and everybody stops and just does it because of their position power. And now they kind of walk into a room and people are like, yeah, and who are you? And why do we care what you have to say? Like, you don't have the clout anymore. And so your sense of identity is just horrifying. And even, there's a lot of research out there too, just relationships. If you're retired and now you're suddenly home all the time, where that's your spouse's domain, and now you're sort of impinging on his or her routine and things. So you have to kind of rediscover those relationships. And again, that's why you don't want to wait till you retire. You want to start thinking about that when you're in your 50s, maybe reconnecting with people that you haven't talked to in a while and finding other ways to define yourself. And I think one of the hardest things for people who are retired is the way they introduce themselves. I used to be a school teacher. I used to be a lawyer. So there is this sense of has been, and who wants to be used to be or has been, right?
Right.
And so what I try and do is what we want to do is embrace kind of the military model. When someone who's an officer retires, they have the status of retired general. So when they introduce themselves, what do you do? I'm a retired general. That's got clout. And it's still his identity. And then he could go on to say, and now I do X, Y, and Z, or do a nonprofit, whatever it might be. But you don't lose your sense of identity if you introduce yourself that way. But for some reason, we don't want to say that. If we say we're retired, people will think I'm old, and I don't want them to think. It just gets kind of silly. So it's a natural transition that needs to be honored and celebrated, very much the way we celebrate when you move from high school to college and college to the world of work. There are big parties, and there's a sense of adventure and okay, what's next, in an exciting way, as opposed to retirement. There's sort of okay, I'm done. Now I'm going to go sit in my rocking chair. And that's not what it's like for boomers anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we tend to describe ourselves in the past tense rather than present tense or future tense. And that's where you suggest that we look at. And the other thing I mentioned in the beginning, so often people will define themselves. Their identity is their title, is their income. That's their measure of success. That's not there anymore. How difficult is it to find a new way to identify and a new measure of success?
Well, as you know from my book, Get a Job, I talk about that from the beginning of your career. You got to be thinking about, how do you measure success? How do you define it? Because it doesn't matter. The only thing I can guarantee is everybody's retirement is going to look different. And that doesn't mean you're successful or you're not successful. My dad, when he retired, he was happy to not do anything. Like, doesn't travel, doesn't have any great hobbies that take up his time. He is just happy to be. And that is like, he's happy. And who am I to say, well, but Dad, you're not doing any charity work. Well, why aren't you traveling? Why aren't you he's happy, and that's all that matters. So if people could just not worry about the judgments of other people and sort of take what is important to them and just say, you know what? It's okay that I'm just doing church work now, or it's okay that I'm doing nothing. I'm visiting with my grandkids. I'm the babysitter. I'm real happy doing that. Isn't that success? Isn't that what we work so hard for all of those years, to be able to get to a point where we can do the things that make us happy?
Exactly.
And don't forget to pay attention and honor that.
Kathleen Brady, our guest on the program. So much good information. She's Director of Coaching, Preferred Transition Resources. PreferredTransition.com is the website for information. You can link on by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. How do we go about actually, and when should we go about defining meaning in our post-career life? How do we go about doing that? Because you've talked about, okay, we need to transition into something else. Most of us need to do that. When should we start doing that, and how do we get started doing that?
I honestly believe you need to start doing it in your 50s. And I say that as someone who is in her 50s, and it's a little bit scary. I purposefully joined ARP as I was doing all this research, and I started to laugh. I am technically a senior citizen.
Isn't that scary when you first start, you're on your mailing list and you're first starting to get solicitations from them?
Exactly. So I go, okay, this is what a senior citizen looks like these days. And you know what? That's okay. Like, it's an honor to be here. I mean, when you think of what the alternative is.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is a good thing. And I think the reason you want to start thinking about it in your 50s is because it gives you time to plan, not just financially, but, which you certainly have to do, but to really be thinking about, okay, I really like the job I have now. How might this work for me in a retired life? Or maybe I think I really like what I do. I'm not going to retire. This is the kind of job that I could do. Maybe instead of now I'm doing 80 hours a week, maybe when I'm retired, I cut back and I'm only doing 30 hours a week. And maybe that will fulfill my sense of purpose. So I think when you're in your 50s, what you want to do is the same thing you do with those high school students. You ask them, what's the dream? In a perfect world, how will you spend your retirement? And you let people start imagining and thinking and say, okay, well, if world travel is what you want, what do you need to do in the next, 5 to 10 years to make sure you've got the finances to be able to do that? Or where would you go, and get them thinking about it. So when they get to the retirement party, particularly if they're at an organization that's mandatory retirement, here's your cake, get out.
Yes.
They've got a plan. They know what they're going to do, as opposed to just waking up in the morning thinking, okay, what do I do today? You don't have a plan. And when you feel rudderless like that, that's when people then spiral into depression and I don't have a purpose, and why am I here? And we want to prevent all of that. So if you kind of map out a strategy, it takes the fear away from it. So even if there's something unexpected happens along the way, you're kind of prepared because you've thought through some of the different permutations of what could go right or go wrong.
When you mention dreams and goals, I think so often people would go, that's fine if you're 20. I'm 62. I'm beyond dreams and goals. Do we ever outgrow dreams and goals?
That's a great question. And I don't think you ever do. But maybe the terminology is wrong.
Yes.
So maybe rather than what's your goal, it's more about what are you curious about? What do you want to explore? So it's not necessarily you have a goal like you've got to accomplish something, but I've always had an interest in X. Now I think I'm going to take some classes in that. I think that'd be fun. Or like my husband in retirement, he's very interested in history. One of the things he'd like to do is visit some of the different battlefields.
Oh yes, yes.
So great. That's a great sort of retirement goal, a retirement plan, if you will. Let's see, every time we go on vacation, let's kind of do it around a battlefield kind of thing. So so maybe goals is probably the wrong terminology, but yeah, you could still have dreams. I think once you stop dreaming, it's over.
It's over. Yes. Yes. Yeah. You're pretty well thrown in the towel at that point. A couple minutes left in the program. When you address your fears, your concerns, How difficult is that to do, and how difficult is it to do it honestly?
Well, I think it's very difficult to do, and particularly for people who have been incredibly successful in their lives, and kind of very focused on business, because this is all feelings, and again, the hardest part of this is you're dealing with your mortality. The older you get, and your whole ideas about aging and what does it mean to get older and deal with health issues and all of that. And so that's pretty scary stuff for a lot of people, which is why I think I so enjoy working with the C-suite folks who are so used to being strong and powerful, and now this is a place where they come where they can be vulnerable and explore that. And oftentimes, once you look at what you're afraid of, if you got a plan for it, you could be a little less afraid of it, And so it really is sort of helping people come through that fear.
Is there a point when you work with these people where there's sort of this self-discovery, and maybe they're realizing, this is not going to be bad. This now gives me the freedom to do what I've always wanted to do, and I've really been in this corporate box and I haven't been able to do it.
And that's the best part of my job. I love when people think they're stuck and they have to do it this way because this is the way it's supposed to be. And they've lived that rigid kind of, this is the path to success. And now you're saying you can do anything. And once they realize, oh, yeah, I can do that. That'd be fun. Then watching that aha moment and watching people go from sort of whatever they were to that little lull in retirement to the relaunch in the next phase, that's sort of fun. So it's sort of, like I always say, going into college, you're the big man on campus in high school, and now you go to college and nobody knows who you are or anything. It's sort of the same process. And we have orientations for them to help them with this, learn this world. I actually think with the retirement age, we need to do a disorientation, okay, you've been in world work and everything. So now let's disorient you from that and kind of do that relaunch into the next phase. And the next phase is good and fun, and that back nine is beautiful, and enjoy it rather than be fearful of it, because you'll thrive there. And that's where your game, right? That's where the game comes in, how you do in that back nine.
Exactly. It's such a great topic, and you've helped so many people during the course of the program, and the article you wrote called Reimagine Retirement. With us on the program, as always a pleasure, Kathleen Brady, Director of Coaching, Preferred Transition Resources. The website is preferredtransition.com. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Always a fast-moving program loaded with information. Kathleen, thank you so much. Great having you on the program. We've got you coming back talking about a couple more topics, so we'll have you back on the show. Thank you for being with us once again.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here all the time. So look forward to seeing you next week.
This will be fun. Once again, Kathleen Brady, Director of Coaching, Preferred Transition Resources. Information at the website, thisweekinamerica.us. We're back on today's program right after these messages.